Kudoki, y'all. It's Dylan charting time of the week. So as always, we have up the major indices. You know what? I wrote down some wrong names here. Let me see. Let me change this real quick. This one should be rut, and this one should be okay. Dow is correct, maybe. Okay. Okie dokie, y'all. So this is how things are looking in the market. So overall, they're pretty good. But we have kind of a weird move. So for the S&P 500, these are the lines that we had last week. So it broke below 2 weeks ago, and then last week it hit this trend line right here. Let me get my wrong thing. Hit this trend line, bounced off. It broke all-time highs on Thursday, and then it came back down. So that's a really strange movement in the market. If we look at RSI, I always mention every week how overbought, oversold something is. It's right on the verge of that overbought territory. So I would say, depending on how Monday opens and how earnings kind of play out next week, there's a lot of earnings coming out. It's going to give us a picture. But just to put everything in perspective, we've had a crazy run. This is since last May. Had a crazy run from 2,700 to 4,200. That's insane. So we bounced off 50-day right here, 50-day right here, and now we're pretty far away from these marks. So whenever the stocks are pretty far away from these, it might be a sign that it's time to come back down close to it. As you can see on these other charts, Dow's right next to the 50-day, the rut right next to the 50-day. So these things have stayed close while this one is pulled away, as well as the NASDAQ is pulled away. So if we start seeing some selling pressure next week, you're going to want to keep track of this. The first place is if it breaks below 4,100 or 41,400. I'll just use SPY indicators. If SPY breaks below 413 or 414, then we're going to have to look for probably a test closer to 400. So potentially not a great next week in the markets, but also earnings are going to have a big play on that. If we see a lot of companies beating earnings, then it could definitely go up some more. If we look at rut, the root, MACD, I don't want MACD, bro. I have the wrong chart up. 1 second, everyone. Let's get rid of this guy. Here we go. What? 1 second, y'all. There we go. So if we look at the daily on the rut, which is the Russell 2000, so these are smaller cap companies. So like I said last week, we broke. Let me bring this in a little bit more. So I said, watch out for an up week. Look what happened. It went up. I said, look out for these trend lines. Bruh, I'm telling you, y'all need to listen to me. It literally hit that trend line, bro, on Thursday when the S&P 500 broke all-time high. It literally hit that trend line that I put in for everybody last week. So right here, this chart is not looking too pretty. So this pattern is called a head and shoulders, where you have one shoulder, a head, and then another shoulder. So let's find a trend line here. So probably from about here, we're going to want to watch this trend line next week. If it breaks below the 50-day and breaks below this trend line, we're probably hitting this purple line next week, which is at 216 on the IWM, which is what you can buy for the RET 2000, the ETF. For the other, if we look at the NASDAQ, it's run up, broke all-time highs. Is that all-time highs? Yep, broke all-time highs. But like I said, oh my gosh, go back last week and look at what I said. Last week I said, watch for a break of the high, or if we start seeing it to kind of stay around this high. I said if it breaks the high and keeps continuing, that's a great sign for the market. And if we also see the rep go up, which is a Russell 2000, go and try to test the high, then that's a good sign. But I said if the S&P 500 stalls out at the highs, which it did, look at this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 days. This whole week it was just sitting at all-time highs, which is not a good sign. And then the Russell 2000 tried to break above this trend line and it couldn't, and it got rejected and coming back down to the 50-day. So if this continues to sizzle right here, if the Nasdaq, which is also around all-time highs, continues to sizzle around the all-time highs, and again, same thing, Dow, like I said, if it look for a test to high for positive in the market, but if it tries to break out and comes back, not a great sign. And if you look at the trend line, I mean, look where this trend line went. There's one trend line. That's hella crooked. Here's the other trend line. It's literally where the stock popped off that move. So these, I would say, going into next week are not great signs. If we see a reversal on the Russell 2000 and break above this high, that's a great sign for the overall markets. If we see the Dow come back and break this all-time high from Thursday, that's another great sign for the markets. But if we start seeing these continue to move down, break below this support, if we see this come down, try to test and break below that support, and if SPY and NASDAQ start breaking below, let me see where a line on NASDAQ is. The NASDAQ is at this point, which is where it's basically testing right now. If it breaks below, we're probably going to have a red week next week in the markets. And what I always say, if all four of these indexes are red next week, all your stocks are going to be red unless one of the stocks you own has earnings that week and it beats. So be careful for a red week if we don't see this come up and try to break above last week's high. That's all I got for you, folks.